The diplomatic shuttle. Harmony broke through the iridescent atmosphere of Jakar, revealing a world that defied human imagination. Ambassador Ethan Cross pressed against the viewport, his breath fogging the glass as he stared at the luminous cities below. Crystalline spires twisted skyward like frozen lightning, their surfaces pulsing with soft, rhythmic light that seemed to breathe with the planet itself. Magnificent, isn't it? The cheerful voice belonged to Omega, his AI translator. Companion, whose holographic form flickered to life beside him. The Jakari have mastered bioluminescent architecture. Each building is actually a living organism, cultivated over centuries to serve specific functions. Ethan straightened his formal diplomatic uniform, navy blue with gold trim that caught the alien light streaming through the viewport. At 31, he'd successfully negotiated first contact protocols with 2 other species, but something about this assignment felt different, more important, more personal. Run through the cultural protocols one more time, he said, though he'd memorized them perfectly. Nerves, he realized. He was actually nervous. Certainly. Omega's form shifted to a pleasant amber glow. The Jakari value honor above all else. Their society is rigidly hierarchical, with the noble class holding absolute authority in diplomatic matters. Takara Neth, who you'll be meeting, is one of their highest-ranking nobles. Think of her as a combination of ambassador, priestess, and judge all in one. The shuttle settled onto a landing platform that seemed to grow from the living city itself. Through the walls, Ethan could hear a low, musical humming. The sound of the city's life force, Omega explained. Physical customs? Ethan asked, running through his mental checklist. Standard diplomatic protocols apply, Omega replied, his attention clearly divided between multiple data streams. Respectful bowing, formal language, maintain proper distance. The Jakari appreciate dignity and restraint above all else. Oh, and they communicate partially through skin color changes. Fascinating biological adaptation, really. The airlock hissed open, and Ethan stepped onto Jakari soil. The air was warm and humid, carrying scents of something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal, making him feel almost graceful as he walked across the bioluminescent platform toward the reception committee. And then he saw her. Takara Neth stood at the center of a group of elegantly robed Jakari, and Ethan felt his diplomatic composure waver. She was breathtakingly beautiful in a way that transcended species, tall and elegant, with skin that shifted between pale gold and soft silver like moonlight on water. Her features were delicate but strong, with large eyes the color of deep amber and hair that moved like liquid starlight. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonic undertones that made his translator work overtime. "Welcome, Ambassador Ethan Cross of Earth," Takara said, her tone formal but carrying an undertone of genuine warmth. "We receive you in the name of the Crystal Court and the eternal light of Jakar. May your presence here bring honor to both our peoples and wisdom to our deliberations." Ethan bowed deeply, as protocol demanded. "The honor is entirely mine, noble Takara. I come with hopes of friendship and mutual understanding between our worlds." Something flickered across Takara's features. Surprise, perhaps, at his use of her formal title, or maybe appreciation for his respectful tone. Her skin shifted to warmer gold tones, which Omega whispered was a positive sign. "Your words carry the weight of sincerity," Takara replied, and Ethan caught something almost personal in her voice. Perhaps this meeting will indeed prove fruitful. As they walked toward the grand hall, Ethan found himself stealing glances at Takara, admiring the grace of her movements and the way light seemed to follow her. He felt confident, prepared, and surprisingly hopeful about these negotiations. He had no idea he was about to commit the gravest cultural offense in Jakari history. The grand hall of Jakar was a cathedral of living light. Crystalline walls pulsed with gentle bioluminescence, while intricate patterns of energy danced across the vaulted ceiling. Ethan walked beside Takara toward the ceremonial dais, acutely aware of the dozens of Jakari nobles watching their every move. Their skin patterns shifted in waves of color. Curiosity, he hoped, rather than hostility. The formal ceremony will begin with the ritual of welcome, Takara explained, her voice carrying that musical quality that made Ethan's chest tighten unexpectedly. I will speak the ancient words of greeting, and you will respond with your people's intentions. Ethan nodded, trying to focus on protocol rather than the way Takara moved like liquid grace beside him. I'm honored by the trust you're showing. Takara's skin shifted to warmer gold tones, and she glanced at him with what might have been surprise. Your sincerity is refreshing, Ambassador. Many who come here speak only of trade agreements and territorial boundaries. You seem to understand that this moment is about more than politics. It is, Ethan said, and meant it. Something about this woman, this world, this moment felt profound in ways he couldn't articulate. They reached the center of the hall, where ancient symbols glowed softly in the living floor. Takara turned to face him, her amber eyes reflecting the dancing lights around them. The assembled nobles fell silent, their collective breathing creating a subtle harmony that resonated through the crystalline structure. By the light of the first crystal and the wisdom of the eternal court, Takara began, her voice carrying perfectly through the hall. We welcome the children of distant Earth to our sacred world. May this meeting plant seeds of understanding that will grow across the void between stars. Her words were poetry, each syllable carefully chosen and beautifully delivered. Ethan felt moved by the genuine welcome in her voice, the hope that colored her tone. When she finished, the hall fell into expectant silence. On behalf of humanity and the people of Earth, Ethan replied, I thank you for this welcome. We come, not as conquerors or merchants, but as neighbors hoping to learn from your wisdom and share our own. He paused, looking directly into Takara's eyes. I am honored to stand before someone who clearly understands that true diplomacy comes from the heart, not just the mind. Takara's skin brightened to brilliant gold, her eyes widening slightly. For a moment, the formal ceremony faded away, and it was just the two of them sharing something unexpected and profound. Your words honor us, she said softly. And Ethan heard something personal in her tone, something meant just for him. It was that moment of connection, that flash of understanding and attraction that made Ethan forget every diplomatic protocol he'd ever learned. Without thinking, moved by pure human instinct to seal a moment of friendship, he reached out and gently touched Takara's arm, just above her wrist. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Takara's golden skin erupted in violent waves of deep crimson, the color spreading from his touchpoint like fire across her entire body. Her eyes went wide with shock, and something Ethan realized was pure rage. The musical quality of her voice became a harsh, guttural sound as she began shouting in rapid Jakari. Violation, desecration. He claims dominance over the sacred light. Omega's translation was frantic, barely keeping up with Takara's fury. Guards, remove this contamination from our sacred hall. The assembled nobles burst into chaos, their skin patterns flashing angry reds and warning oranges. Heavy footsteps thundered across the crystalline floor as Captain Vex and his guards rushed toward the dais, weapons drawn. Wait! Ethan called out, raising his hands peacefully, but his words were lost in the uproar. I didn't mean silence. Takara's voice cracked like thunder through the hall. She stood, trembling with rage, her entire body now pulsing angry. Crimson, You dare speak after such violation. You claim ownership of what is sacred and pure. Captain Vex reached them, his own skin blazing warning colors. Noble Takara, step back from the contamination. Guards, restrain the human. Strong hands seized Ethan's arms, pulling them behind his back. Energy restraints snapped around his wrists, burning slightly against his skin. Please, let me explain, he said desperately. I meant no offense. In my culture, touch is a sign of respect, of friendship. Your culture is poison, Takara snarled, pointing at him with a shaking finger. To touch the sacred flesh of nobility, without permission, is to declare yourself our master, to claim the right of domination over our very souls. Ethan's blood ran cold as Omega whispered the translation and cultural context. Oh no, the AI murmured. Ambassador, touching their nobles without explicit consent is considered an act of claiming ownership, like marking property. It's the gravest insult possible in their society. Take him to the holding chambers, Takara commanded, her voice sharp as broken crystal. By the ancient laws, he has forfeited his right to freedom through this violation. The penalty is... She stopped, seeming to struggle with emotion. The penalty will be decided by the sacred court. As the guards dragged him away, Ethan looked back desperately at Takara. For just an instant, he thought he saw something other. Then rage flashed across her features, confusion perhaps, or even hurt. But then the crimson fury returned, and she turned away from him. This diplomatic mission is terminated, she declared to the hall. Let word be sent to Earth that their ambassador has violated our most sacred laws. They will answer for this insult. The last thing Ethan saw before being hauled from the Grand Hall was Takara standing alone at the center of the dais, her body still blazing with angry crimson light, looking suddenly very small and very alone, despite her rage. In his cell hours, later, as the full weight of his mistake settled on him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen tears in her amber eyes just before she turned away. The holding chamber was a hollow in the living city itself, its walls pulsing with dim, melancholy blue light that seemed to respond to Ethan's emotional state. He sat on the organically curved bench that had grown from the floor, his head in, his hands trying to process the magnitude of his diplomatic disaster. The political ramifications are significant, Omega said quietly, his holographic form flickering with subdued colors. Earth's diplomatic corps is in emergency session. There's talk of sanctions, of humans being banned from first contact. Missions entirely... Ethan looked up, his face haggard. How could something so simple go so wrong? In human culture, that touch would have been barely noticeable, a gesture of friendship, nothing more. Cultural translation is imperfect, Omega admitted. The briefing materials mentioned maintaining respectful distance, but the specific taboos around physical contact were buried in subsection 47 of the cultural addendum. I should have emphasized it more strongly. This isn't a fault, Ethan said firmly. I'm the diplomat. I should have been more careful, more aware. He stood and began pacing the small chamber. What exactly did I do to her? What does it mean in their culture? Omega's form shifted to somber purple tones. Among the Jakari, physical touch between non-bonded individuals is incredibly intimate, but touching someone of noble rank without explicit permission is considered a declaration of ownership, of dominance. It's equivalent to claiming another person as property. Ethan felt sick. And Takara is one of their highest-ranking nobles. Essentially, you declared yourself her master in front of their entire diplomatic assembly. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor outside. Ethan looked up as the cell's energy barrier shimmered and dissolved. He expected Captain Vex or another guard, but instead a lone figure stepped into the chamber, Takara. She had changed from her ceremonial robes into simpler clothing, though still elegant. Her skin had returned to its natural gold and silver tones, though patches of deeper color still flickered across her features. Most striking were her eyes, red-rimmed and tired, as if she'd been crying. "Omega, privacy mode," she said quietly. "Of course, noble Takara." The AI's form faded, though Ethan knew he was still monitoring. For a long moment they stared at each other across the small chamber. Takara seemed smaller somehow, more vulnerable than the commanding figure who had raged at him in the Grand. "All, why did you do it?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan sat back down, not wanting to loom over her. "I don't know. I was moved by your words, by the ceremony, by—" He met her eyes. "By you. Where I come from, when we feel a connection with someone, when we want to show respect or friendship, we reach out. Literally. A handshake, a touch on the shoulder, a hug. It's how we say, 'I see you, I value you, I want to know you better.'" Takara's skin rippled with confused colors. "You valued me." "I did. I do." Ethan leaned forward earnestly. "Takara, I have never met anyone who spoke with such grace, such genuine hope for peace between our peoples. When you talked about planting seeds of understanding, it felt like I'd found someone who truly understood what diplomacy should be about." She was quiet for a long time. Her skin cycling through colors Ethan was beginning to recognize as confusion and internal conflict. "In our culture," she said slowly, "touch is reserved for bonded pairs, for family, for the most intimate relationships. To be touched by someone means they have the right to claim you, to possess you." "But that's not what I meant," Ethan said desperately. "I would never claim to own another person. I was trying to show respect, to show that I saw you as an equal, as someone worthy of friendship." "Friendship," Takara repeated the word like she was tasting something foreign. "Your species bonds through physical contact. We can. Not always, but yes, sometimes. A handshake between strangers, a hug between friends, He stopped, realizing where that train of thought was leading. "A what?" Takara asked quietly. Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks. Between people who care about each other deeply, touch can mean love, tenderness, a promise to protect and cherish. Takara's skin flushed with soft pink tones, and she looked away. "When you touched me," she said, very quietly, "I felt something I had never experienced before. Not violation, not dominance, but—" She struggled with the words, "warmth, connection. For just a moment I felt less alone than I have in years." Ethan's heart clenched. "Takara." "But then my training took over," she continued, still not looking at him. "Everything I had been taught told me you were claiming ownership of me, declaring yourself my master." The rage came so quickly, so powerfully, that I couldn't think past it. She finally met his eyes again, and Ethan saw confusion and something that might have been longing. "I have been alone all my life, Ambassador Ethan Cross. Nobles of my rank are forbidden from bonding with others of lesser status, and there are so few who equal my position. I had never been touched with kindness before." "And now?" Ethan asked softly. Takara's skin cycled through a dozen colors before settling on warm gold with traces of pink. "Now I find myself wondering what it would feel like if you touched me. Again, knowing what I know now, wondering if that warmth I felt was real or if I imagined it in my confusion." The chamber fell silent except for the gentle humming of the living walls. Ethan felt the air between them charge with possibility and danger. Here was a woman who had never known gentle touch, and here was he, about to be executed for the touch he'd already given her. "I would like to know," he said carefully, "what it would be like to touch you with your permission, with your understanding." Of what it means to me. Takara's breath caught, and her skin brightened to brilliant gold. That, she whispered, is exactly what I was afraid you would say. 3 days had passed since Takara's secret visit to Ethan's cell. 3 days of growing political crisis as Earth's diplomatic corps scrambled to contain the fallout. Omega reported that some human officials were calling for Ethan's immediate execution to appease the Jakari, while others demanded his release. The delicate first contact between their species hung by a thread, but Ethan could think only of Takara. The loneliness in her voice, the way her skin had flushed when she admitted to wondering about his touch, the fear and longing warring in her amber eyes. "The Sacred Court convenes in 1 hour," Omega announced, his holographic form dim with worry. "Takara will be required to pronounce your sentence in front of the assembled nobility. The traditional punishment for your violation is severe." "Death?" Ethan asked quietly. "Exile from all civilized worlds," Omega replied, "which, for a diplomat, might be worse than death." "But Ethan," the AI's form flickered, "I've been monitoring the palace communications. Takara has been arguing with the court for days, trying to find alternative interpretations of the law. She's fighting for you." Ethan's heart raced. "Can you get a message to her? Tell her I want to speak to the court. I have something I need to say." An hour later, Ethan stood in chains before the sacred court in the grand hall where his troubles had begun. The assembled Jakari nobles watched him with skin patterns ranging from curious orange to hostile red. At the center of the high dais sat Takara, resplendent in formal robes that made her skin glow like captured starlight, but her amber eyes were filled with pain. "Ambassador Ethan Cross of Earth," she began, her voice carefully formal, "you stand accused of the highest violation of our sacred laws. Do you understand the gravity of your crime?" "I do now, noble Takara," Ethan replied, his voice carrying clearly through the crystalline hall. "I understand that I caused you pain and dishonor. I understand that I violated your most sacred customs. And I understand that my ignorance is no excuse for the harm I've caused." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Takara's skin flickered, with surprise and something warmer. "However," Ethan continued, "I request the right to make one final statement before you pass judgment." The court erupted in shocked whispers. Captain Vex stepped forward. "The human has no rights before this court. His crimes speak for themselves." "Wait," Takara said, raising her hand. Her skin cycled through rapid color changes as she struggled. "With decision, the ancient laws do allow for final words. I will hear him." Ethan took a deep breath, knowing this moment would determine not just his fate, but possibly the future of human-Jakari relations. "Noble Takara, honored members of the Sacred Court, I stand before you guilty of a terrible misunderstanding. I touched your sacred noble without permission, and by your laws, that makes me worthy of the severest punishment." He paused, meeting Takara's eyes directly. "But I ask you to consider this. If I truly believed myself your master, if I truly sought to claim dominance over noble Takara, would I now do this?" Before anyone could react, Ethan lifted his shackled hands and rolled up his sleeve, exposing his forearm. "Noble Takara, by the laws of your people, you have the right to mark me as punishment for my crime. I offer myself willingly to receive that mark." The court fell into stunned silence. Even the living walls seemed to dim their glow in response to the collective shock. "I offer my flesh to your judgment," Ethan continued, his voice strong and clear. "Mark me as you see fit. Brand me as a criminal, scar me as a reminder of my ignorance, do whatever your laws demand. I submit myself completely to your will." Takara rose from her seat, her skin cycling rapidly through every color in the spectrum. You offer yourself. For marking? Willingly? I do," Ethan said simply. "Because I respect you, noble Takara. because I respect your laws and your culture, even though I failed to understand them before. And because—" He met her eyes, pouring all his sincerity into his gaze. "Because if accepting your judgment is the only way to show you that I meant no harm, that I saw you as someone worthy of honor rather than dominance, then I gladly accept it." Captain Vex stepped forward, his weapon drawn. "This is some human trick. No species has ever offered themselves for marking. It violates the natural order." "Does it?" Takara asked softly, walking slowly down from the dais toward Ethan. "Or does it show a courage and humility we have never encountered before?" She stopped directly in front of him, so close he could see the rapid flutter of colors across her skin. "In all our history," she continued, speaking to the court but never taking her eyes off Ethan, "those who violate our sacred laws fight their punishment, deny their crimes, or beg for mercy. Never has anyone offered themselves willingly for marking. Never has anyone submitted themselves completely to our judgment while maintaining their dignity." She reached out her hand, stopping just short of touching his exposed arm. "If you truly meant to claim dominance over me, Ambassador, you would never offer yourself this way. A master does not submit to his claimed property." Ethan felt the warmth radiating from her hand, so close to his skin. "I am not your master, Takara. I never wanted to be. I wanted to be your friend, your equal, perhaps." He swallowed hard. "Perhaps something more, if you would have allowed it." Takara's skin flushed brilliant gold, touched with deep pink. "Something more," she whispered. "I think I was falling in love with you from the moment I heard you speak," Ethan admitted, knowing he might be sealing his doom but unable to stop the words. "Your grace, your wisdom, your hope for peace between our peoples. When I touched you, it wasn't to claim ownership. It was because I was drawn to you in ways I barely understood." Takara's breathing quickened, her hand trembling inches from his skin. Around them, the court watched in absolute silence, witnessing something unprecedented in their history. "If I were to mark you now," Takara said very quietly, "it would not be as punishment. It would be as—" She struggled with the concept. "As acceptance, as a sign that you belong not as property, but as—" She looked up into his eyes. "As someone I might choose to bond with if our peoples were not at war over this misunderstanding." Ethan felt his heart stop. Takara. Very slowly, with infinite gentleness, Takara placed her palm against his forearm. Her skin was warm and soft, and where she touched him, both their skins began to glow with soft, harmonious light. "I could mark you," she said, her voice barely audible. "But instead, I choose to heal you, to heal us both." The glow spread from their joined touch, and Ethan felt something profound pass between them, understanding, forgiveness, and the first tender stirrings of a love that might bridge the stars themselves. The glow that emanated from Takara's touch spread beyond their joined hands, casting gentle light throughout the grand hall. The assembled court watched in wonder as their most sacred noble openly chose healing over punishment, forgiveness over justice. The very walls of the living city seemed to pulse in harmony with the moment. "Impossible," Captain Vex breathed, his weapon lowering. "The sacred light responds to their union. How can this be?" Takara kept her hand pressed gently against Ethan's arm. Her skin, now cycling through the soft golds and pinks that Ethan was learning, meant deep affection and trust. "Perhaps," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, "our laws were never meant to prevent connection, but to ensure it was chosen freely and with full understanding." She turned to address the court, her other hand finding Ethan's shackled one. "Honored nobles, we have witnessed something unprecedented today. A being from another world, ignorant of our ways, committed what we considered the gravest of violations. But when faced with judgment, He did not flee or fight or beg. He offered himself completely to our mercy, showing respect for our laws, even as he maintained his dignity. Elder Zethvar, the most senior member of the court, stepped forward. His ancient skin rippled with contemplative purples and golds. Noble Takara speaks truth. In 8 centuries of life, I have never seen such courage from one who faced our justice. Tell me, human, why did you offer yourself for marking? Ethan looked from Takara to the assembled court, acutely aware that his next words would shape the future of human-Jakari relations. Honored Elder, I offered myself because I realized that my ignorance had caused pain to someone I was coming to care for deeply. In my culture, when you hurt someone you love, you do whatever it takes to make it right, even if it costs you everything. Someone you love. Elder Zethvar's skin brightened with surprise. Yes, Ethan said simply, looking directly at Takara. I love her courage, her wisdom, her dedication to peace. I love the music in her voice and the way she moves like liquid starlight. I love her strength and her gentleness. And if she would have me, I would spend my life learning to love her in the ways her culture deems proper. Takara's skin exploded in brilliant gold and pink patterns, her eyes wide with wonder. Ethan, noble Takara, Elder Zethvar said formally, what is your judgment on this human who violated our sacred laws? Takara straightened, her voice taking on the ceremonial cadence required by law. I find that Ambassador Ethan Cross acted in ignorance, not malice. His offer of himself for marking shows respect for our ways and genuine remorse for his violation. Therefore I propose not punishment, but education. She gestured, and Captain Vex reluctantly removed Ethan's shackles. I, Takara Neth of the Sacred Court, take personal responsibility for teaching this human our proper customs. I propose a new form of diplomacy, one based not on cold treaties, but on emotional honesty and mutual understanding. The court erupted in excited whispers, their skin patterns flashing with interest and approval. Elder Zethvar raised his hand for silence. And what of the laws he violated? The elder asked. Takara smiled, and Ethan felt his heart soar at the sight. The law states that unwelcome touch is a violation. But as I have just demonstrated to this entire assembly, his touch was not unwelcome. It was simply premature. She turned to face Ethan fully, taking both his hands in hers. Ambassador Ethan Cross of Earth, I formally grant you permission to touch me now and in the future, as a sign of the bond growing between us. Will you accept this honor? Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. With all my heart, Takara. But are you certain? Your people, your position. My people need to learn, as I have learned, that love can transcend species, that understanding can bridge any gap. She squeezed his hands gently. And my position gives me the authority to pioneer this new form of diplomacy, a diplomacy of the heart. Elder Zethvar stepped forward, his ancient features creased in what might have been a smile. Then let it be recorded in the sacred annals. On this day, Takara Neth chose healing over punishment, love over law, and in doing so, opened a new path between our peoples. The formal ceremony that followed was unlike anything in Jakari history. The treaty signed between Earth and Jakar established not just trade agreements and territorial boundaries, but a revolutionary cultural exchange program. Takara and Ethan would serve as the first ambassadors of this new form of diplomacy, teaching both species to understand love and friendship across the vast differences between them. As the ceremony concluded and the nobles began to disperse, Takara led Ethan to a private balcony overlooking the luminous city. The twin suns were setting, painting the crystalline spires in shades of gold and rose that matched Takara's glowing skin. "Are you certain about this?" Ethan asked quietly, still hardly daring to believe what had happened. bonding with an alien, changing centuries of tradition. Takara silenced him by placing her finger gently against his lips, the first deliberately intimate touch she had ever given. "Ethan Cross," she said, her voice warm with affection and amusement, "you have already changed everything simply by being yourself, by showing me that touch can mean tenderness instead of dominance, that love can exist between beings who have never even seen each other's worlds." She moved closer, her skin radiating warmth and soft light. "Besides," she added with a smile that took his breath away, "someone needs to teach you proper Jakari touching customs. We have so much more to explore than just holding hands." Ethan laughed, feeling lighter than he had since arriving on this beautiful, impossible world. "I'm a very dedicated student. I'm counting on it," Takara replied. Then, with infinite gentleness, she reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "Perhaps touch is not always a weapon, after all." "Perhaps not," Ethan agreed, covering her hands with his own. "Perhaps sometimes it's the beginning of everything." As the alien suns set over Jakar, casting their joined silhouettes against the glowing city, two beings from different worlds discovered that love, indeed, could transcend any boundary, even the vast, star-filled darkness between their homes. The touch that had nearly destroyed everything had become the foundation for something beautiful, something unprecedented, something that would change both their species forever. And in the growing twilight, as Takara leaned up for their first real kiss, Ethan realized that sometimes the most catastrophic mistakes could become the most perfect beginnings.